ready for another edition of Just Say No.
Can't you see that there's another way to love?
Ready for another edition of Just Say No.
Can't you see that there's another way to love? Soldier blue, soldier blue. Can't you see that there's another way to love?
Yes, back again here. Just Say No news update. We have ready for another edition of Just Say No. Again, skirmishing on the borders. They're bombing Lebanon, and they are planning an assault.
Israeli leaders, including Benjamin Netanyahu. And one of perhaps the best known of the Nuremberg principles is Nuremberg Principle 4, which we can actually show. Tamara, I hadn't highlighted it, but if it's possible to show it, we should. In any case, I'll read it out. This is, quote, "The fact that a person acted pursuant to the order of his government or of a superior does not relieve him from responsibility under international law, provided a moral choice was in fact possible to him." So the Nuremberg principle is very clear that saying I was just following orders, when you had a choice to defy those orders or to resign, means that you remain culpable if by following those orders you aided in the commission of war crimes, which Matthew Miller arguably did. And he would not be alone, because you'll remember that we've spoken in previous programs with Layla Al-Arian, the filmmaker and documentary maker from Al Jazeera, about State Department officials who helped cover up the fact that Israel was blocking humanitarian aid. And there were some officials who resigned, who made the moral choice to resign because they could not go along with these policies that they knew would facilitate and prolong this genocide. Matthew Miller, until the very last day, followed the orders to aid and abet war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And he has to deny it's a genocide, because otherwise he would be implicitly admitting that he took part in a genocide. Right. Unfortunately, at least in this world, at this time, Matthew Miller is not being held accountable. In a just world, he would be at least investigated for as an accessory to war crimes and genocide. But in the world we live in, he is being rewarded, and he's now a partner in the Washington lobbying firm and influence peddling firm Via Novo, where he's going to monetize his experience covering up war crimes and genocide for Israel. And you can see there the page advertising his services at Via Novo, which as part of its pitch to potential clients says, quote, "Via Novo is a strategic advisory firm for high-stakes brand, policy, and crisis issues. For 2 decades, we have helped some of the world's most recognized names shape public opinion and media conversation, win legislative fights and invest about battles, manage crises and litigation, and expand across markets and borders." So just how disgusting, immoral, and depraved is that he goes from lying to perpetuate genocide to selling his services as a so-called spokesperson to whatever unsavory corporations or governments may come to Via Novo as clients.
I mean, that's a very regular pattern that we see with former State Department, officials, government spokespeople. They go on to become, anchors at MSNBC or private sector consultants or think tank members, continuing to do in private what they did in public, just making a lot more money doing so. Always failing, lying upwards. And he's not the only colleague of, he's not the only one in the former Biden administration that is acquiring large sums of money to continue to toe the pro-genocide line. Matthew Miller's colleague, Vedant Patel, has been hired by pro-Israel lobbying firm SKDK, as reported by the website Sludge. Do you want to talk a little bit about Vedant? Remind us of his work.
Well, you can see the image of him there on the screen. I'm going to spare us one of his a clip of any of his press conferences where he just lied outright, constantly denying Israeli crimes or justifying them or blaming the victims, the same sorts of things that Matthew Miller did for all those 15, 16 months of the Biden administration's active role in this genocide. But according to Sludge, this website, Vedant Patel, who spent much of the Biden administration defending Israel's military actions in Gaza as State Department spokesperson, has landed a new job, senior vice president at SKDK, a Democratic consulting firm that is also a registered foreign agent for Israel. During his time at the State Department, Patel effectively served as a public defender of Israeli policy as the administration stood firmly behind Israel despite mounting casualties and global condemnation. Now at SKDK, he joins a company explicitly hired to do the same, conducting press outreach and protecting Israel's image, only this time on Israel's payroll. And we can actually see that. I looked up SKDK's most recent FARA filing. This is the Foreign Agents Registration Act filing that the firm has to make with the U.S. government. And if you scroll down, Tamara, just to line 4 there, you can see that the name to line 4, you can see the name of the principal client of SKDK is the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And Tamara, if you then scroll down to the last 2 pages of this document, you'll see that it lists the very last 2 pages all the way down. There we go. Yeah, you can just stop there. You can see this is a list of all the media organizations that this Israeli government lobbying firm has reached out to on behalf of the Israeli government. And you can see what this firm does. It reaches out to all the mainstream media we know on behalf of the Israeli government, likely putting pressure on them, spinning stories, putting forward lies. And there you see ABC, BBC, NBC, NPR, MSNBC, Wall Street Journal, you name it, they're on that list. And so Vedant Patel was just until a few months ago working officially for the United States government, and now he went immediately to working officially for the Israeli government. I mean,
incredible.
It's all this corruption, this influence peddling is all done in the open. And this is what you have to think about when they're up on these gigs with these corrupt influence peddling firms pay far more than a government salary. So actually, when they are up on that podium lying to cover up genocide, they're actually auditioning for these jobs. When they're on the podium, that's their job interview for these lobbying firms. And what that is that they're getting paid now is blood money. Their salary is paid for with the blood of all those thousands of Palestinians that even Matthew Miller admitted could have been saved, could be alive today if the Biden administration had done what it could do, if the Trump administration does what it could do right now and stop this genocide.
All those media, that only covered 3 days. When you were scrolling down on that document, it would only covered 3 days. That's how much lobbying they were doing.
Right, and they have to file those FARA reports regularly. So if you were to look through all the FARA reports, you'd see all their activities, all their meetings on behalf of the Israeli government. So, whatever the period was for that report, that's what it covers.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Just astonishing, even though it shouldn't be, because this is how the system operates. This is how it's engineered. This is how these people get to where they are, lying and shilling for colonialism and genocide and empire, of course. Let's turn to a brief discussion. There have been new reports of Israel supporting Palestinian collaborator groups in Gaza. I mean, this is not a new thing. There have been these kind of collaborationist armed gangs. We've seen our contributors on the ground in Gaza talk about these armed gangs that are disrupting aid deliveries, that are looting humanitarian aid trucks, that are working with the Israelis. But what's different? What's new about these reports, and why is it significant that they're coming out right now? That Israel is actually admitting to some sort of collaboration.
Well, earlier today, the former Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman made a headline-grabbing claim in the Israeli media, and he said that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is arming groups that he described as ISIS-linked criminal gangs in Gaza in order to fight Hamas. Lieberman, of course, has been in coalition governments with Netanyahu in the past, but he's now his political rival and in opposition. And if we could look at the first story, this article from Ynet, the English version of Ynet, came out just before we went on air, and it explains the story. A couple of quotes from it. The operation, led by the Shin Bet Internal Security Service, is described as planned and managed with the goal of reducing Israeli military casualties while systematically undermining Hamas through targeted strikes, infrastructure destruction, and the promotion of rival local forces. An unnamed senior official told Ynet, quote, "It's a calculated effort. While it'll take time to judge its success, it clearly disrupts Hamas's ability to maintain the deterrence and security it once enjoyed. Eventually, it could open the door to new governing alternatives." End of quote. And so, yeah, I mean, this is something that's been talked about for quite a long time now, for many months. And this is it's kind of a confirmation, or at least it aligns with that. It's it's the actual, and as a former Israeli minister talking about it. And according to Ynet, he actually did that against military censorship. As we know, all Israeli press is censored by the military. And according to this Ynet article, quote, "The initiative, in other words, the arming of these gangs in Gaza, was publicly exposed on Thursday when former Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman violated military censorship in disclosing that Israel had armed a Gaza clan fighting Hamas. The censorship office then cleared part of the information for publication, but security officials said the damage had already been done. The Prime Minister's office did not deny the report, stating only that Israel is working to defeat Hamas through various means, following the recommendations of all security chiefs." And it notes, during his term as defense minister, Lieberman had backed similar efforts in Syria, arming rebel factions aligned with Israeli interests. Interestingly, if we can go to the next article, the English version of this article plays down the sort of ISIS aspect of the story. And you can see here, this is an auto-translate of the Hebrew version, which is headlined, according to Lieberman, Netanyahu formed 5 ISIS-identified militias in Gaza. Prime Minister's obviously not deny. Obviously, it's a machine translation, so it's a little bit janky there. Yes, so so allegedly, according to Lieberman, this militia in question, led by a man called Yasser Abu Shabab, is allegedly affiliated with ISIS. And aspect is mentioned only in passing in the English version. And today's reports in the Israeli press align with what Palestinians have been saying for a long time now. The Palestinian analyst and writer Mohammed Shahada, who's with the European Council of Foreign Relations, posted a thread to X back in November last year. And in it, he accused Israel of, quote, aiding ISIS-linked terrorists and criminals to sow chaos and famine in Gaza, and named the same man who's come out in the press reports today, Yasser Abu Shabab, as being the leader of this militia, which is now reportedly working in collaboration with Israel in Gaza. And also that same month, February 2024, the Washington Post reported that armed criminal gangs in Gaza had been looting UNAID trucks. I think we have that headline as well. If you've got that tomorrow, yeah, thank you. And they've been doing. You can see the headline there: gangs looting. This from November last year. Gangs looting Gaza aid operate in areas under Israeli control. Aid groups say. So yeah, these gangs had been looting UNAID trucks. And our friend Abu Bakr Abed, has also reported on this for us, and they've done this under the protection of Israeli forces, as viewers can see from this article. Next tweet. So more recently, last month, Mohammed Shahada also posted this photo of Yasser Abu Shabab, the leader of this militia, reporting that his militia had set up checkpoints in Rafah under Israeli protection and had been fitted out with brand new military equipment. You can see in these photos and others that are circulating online at the moment. And notably, this equipment looks very similar to other equipment issued to the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And finally, the final tweet. We've got a video, but Yasser Abu Shabab also came out in the open this week, and he posted a video online. It was posted with him actually appearing in the video, claiming, and in it he claims to act as a legitimate authority. And he called on residents of Rafah to return to Rafah, saying that there are camps being set up under Israeli military surveillance and promising them aid. So, in effect, aided by Israel, this militia seems to be looting UN aid, stopping it from getting to Palestinians, and then actually using it as a lure to trap Palestinians in concentration camps, effectively, under the ultimate control of Israel. And as Nora detailed in a news report at the start of this week's live stream, the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a US and Israeli-backed organization, began operations last month in Rafah. Desperate people seeking food aid from them came under Israeli fire, and they've killed more than 100, as Nora detailed. Now, with the Israel-backed Yasser Abu Shabab militia setting up new camps in Rafah, it all looks to be part of a trap to concentrate Palestinians in one area, making it easier for them to be killed by Israel. So, regardless of whether or not these groups are ISIS affiliated, we it seems pretty sure that they're actually Israel affiliated. I think that's the most salient point, and much like the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, Israel has for decades been on a search for reliable native agents, and this is, of course, a common strategy, a strategy as old as colonialism itself.
I mean, what like I'm always very curious about the timing of this. I mean, Avigdor Lieberman, he is a genocidal fascist. I mean, he was the one who, when he was an MP, he came up with the idea of rounding up all the Palestinian citizens of Israel, and drowning them in the sea. He why would he be the
But
one at this time?
yeah, it's a good question.
To try and leak this information that actually isn't new. I mean, yeah.
His criticism is that the guns will be turned on Israel eventually, which seems unlikely to me. But he's trying to political point score against his rival Netanyahu.
Yeah, I think that's the key point here. I mean, there is new information in the sense that this is now confirmed, really, basically from Israeli sources. The fact that it was under Israeli military censorship, and that he violated censorship and they cleared it for publication is confirmation that this is true, that Israel is backing these groups, and Netanyahu couldn't deny it. So, what was assumed in the past, what was likely in the past, is now confirmed to the extent that these groups are working directly with Israel. So I think that's what we can say is new. But I think Asa is right, because we also had Yair Lapid, another Israeli opposition politician, nominally opposition politician, coming out making the same point, that they say their argument is Netanyahu basically allowed Hamas to flourish, and then Hamas attacked us. And now, without any strategic discussion, without any real, sense of what might happen, he's doing the same with other groups. He's arming other groups who will then use their guns against us. And this all points to the sense that Netanyahu is more politically vulnerable than he has been in a while, and they want to bring down the government. And so that, I think that's what's going on here. But often, I think here there's 2 points to make here that I think are important. One is, often we get information, real information that reveals hidden truths from Israelis attacking each other. That's a pattern we've seen in the past. A lot of the October 7th revelations come because of Israelis attacking and sniping at each other, and again thinking it's all in their secret language and no one else is going to hear it. And the other thing is, again, to underline that point that Asa made, that this has been a long-standing Israeli strategy in Palestine and in other countries that Israel occupies. So in Palestine, there has always been a search for Palestinian collaborators. The village leagues in the 1970s to set up local collaborator bodies in the West Bank, then basically turning the PLO into Israel's subcontractor in the Oslo Accords, and then developing that further with Abbas, but also in Lebanon with the so-called South Lebanon Army, which was the proxy militia that Israel set up and supported for more than 2 decades, from the late 1970s until the Israeli occupation collapsed, thanks to the resistance in 2000. But then again in Syria, as Asa acknowledged there, with what came out in terms of Israeli support for ISIS and Al-Qaeda linked militias in Syria. So this is a long-standing Israeli strategy.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about what this all means and how it's going to play out. Is there anything else we want to say about, where we are right now in terms of the growing global revulsion at Israel? Ali, you wrote and published a post this week about a new survey. It kind of goes back to our interview with Craig Mochaibar talking about, Israel becoming, because of public pressure and because of this, global revulsion at this genocide, being more and more isolated. And so it means that we have to keep, putting more and more pressure on the levers of power to further isolate, to sanction Israel, to stop these weapons from being manufactured and delivered and then dropped on the homes of Palestinian children. Talk about this survey, what some of the key points are.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight this. I guess it's a good news story in a way, and we all need that. But the Pew Research Center, which is this very mainstream US-based research center, did a survey in 24 countries around the world, including in Latin America, Europe, Asia. And the only country in the immediate vicinity of Palestine that they included is Turkey. And I suppose doing any more surveys in the region would have been redundant because you would have gotten unanimity. But what it found is that Israel's more unpopular and viewed more negatively than ever. And these shifts are significant in some areas. They say, for example, in 20 of the 24 countries surveyed, around half of adults or more have an unfavorable view of Israel. Around 3/4 or more hold this view in Australia, Greece, Indonesia, Japan, the Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, and Turkey. And it was really remarkable. I mean, some things stood out. For example, among the European countries they surveyed, Israel is viewed most negatively in the Netherlands, with 78% of the public viewing it negatively, which is really remarkable because the Netherlands, in terms of its government, has always been one of the most pro-Israel countries. And the numbers across Europe are very high. Spain, 75%, Sweden, 75%, Germany, 64%, which is really remarkable, again, given the unanimity in support of Israel among the German political class. But again, that explains why there's so much violent repression in Germany. If the population were on board with the pro-Israel, pro-genocide policy, you wouldn't need to send the police out to beat people up all the time and to censor people and to take them to court and so on. Even Hungary, whose government is very staunchly pro-Israel. Remember that Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban a couple of months ago welcomed Netanyahu to Budapest, defying the International Criminal Court arrest warrant for Netanyahu. Even in Hungary, a majority of people view Israel negatively. And in all of these countries except two, Israel's negatives are far, far higher than its positives. So it has net negative ratings virtually across the world. Turkey wins the prize, so to speak, with Israel with 93% of the population viewing Israel negatively and only 4% viewing it favorably. But there were some other notable results. In the US, for example, for the first time ever, at least the first time that I've ever seen in decades of following this issue and in all the polls I've seen, a majority of Americans now view Israel negatively. Over the last decade or so, we've seen a lot of polls showing that subsections of the US population, whether it's people who lean Democrat, younger people, people of color, majorities view Israel negatively or support Palestinian rights. But this is the first time we see a majority of US adults overall viewing Israel negatively. That is really a historic shift. And what's also interesting is that there is a break on the American right. Pew observes that in many of the countries where it conducted the surveys, people who place themselves on the left have a more negative view of Israel than those on the right. But this ideological gap is most pronounced in the US, where 74% of liberals have a negative view of Israel compared with 30% of conservatives. But there's something really interesting here, because Pew did a survey focused on Americans back in April, and there they found a sharp rise in the number of Republican voters who view Israel unfavorably. It rose from 27% to 37% just since 2022, indicating that Israel really is losing support across the political spectrum. And we can see this in terms of public discourse, in that there has been a notable new phenomenon of prominent right-wing commentators such as Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Judge Andrew Napolitano voicing skepticism and sometimes really harsh criticism of Israel and U.S. support for Israel that once seemed unthinkable. So I really do think that there are some fundamental shifts going on here. As we discussed with Craig Mukhaiber, it's frustrating how slow these filter through into action, but they are doing so. And we did see some action this week. Spain canceled a major $310 million arms deal with Israel's Rafael to buy Spike anti-tank missiles, and that's not likely to be the last such action. So things are changing, and I think that we can take heart from that, and that should encourage us.
It really should. Thanks for that, Ali. And before we go, let's take a look at the website. There's so much that we have published this week. We have just several really incredible features by our writers in Gaza. They're excruciatingly beautiful and moving and devastating to read. So please go read those features, including one by Donia Abusita, who we had on the program last week, of course. 3 pieces of Israeli shrapnel. She talks about her family and the injuries that her loved ones have experienced. And then we have just some fantastic news reports, analyses. We have a new podcast from last week where students at USF here in San Francisco and MIT have successfly pressured their administrations to divest from certain Israeli companies. Give that a listen. And then, of course, sign up for our email list up at the top. And yes, Ali?
Yeah, I just want to highlight, if I can, Nora, just a couple of stories, I think. I mean, you're right. It's all amazing. And I'm so proud of all the journalism and writing that we're able to publish. But just a couple of pieces that really stand out for me. The reportage by Khalid al-Karshali in Gaza, barely any flour, no meat. And he talks about the struggle to survive the famine, especially people trying to prepare for a little, it's some way to mark the Eid al-Adha, which is beginning, which is in the next couple of days. Beginning tonight in the region, and that's a very tough piece to read, but I'm very glad that Khalid continues to report from the ground in Gaza. The piece by Dalal Yassin gives some coverage, some analysis of the situation in Lebanon, where Mahmoud Abbas recently visited and is trying to disarm Palestinians there. Just very bizarre moves by Abbas. Some great analysis by Yassin about Abbas's attempts to assert authority and legitimacy there, which seem doomed to fail. So it's a bit of a puzzle why he'd do that. There's also a piece just published by our colleague Michael Brown on the genocidal language by Israeli groups like far-right groups like Im Tirtzu, whose new slogan that they were touting on Israel's so-called Jerusalem Day is "No victory without a Nakba," and what Michael focuses on is the support that these groups and the support that these phenomena are getting from U.S. politicians and from U.S. Political groups. So again, highlighting the complicity there. So there's just a great deal of extraordinary work that I'm very proud that all of our viewers, listeners, and readers enable us to publish with their support. So thank you so much for helping us get this information out. We can't say it enough. We can't do it without you.
That's right. And if you are so moved and are able, hit the donate now link up at the top there. And especially, it really helps, especially with our monthly donations. And thank you to all of our monthly donors for stepping up and continuing to support this publication and our contributors in Gaza. It goes directly to them. Anything you want to say about our monthly contributors, Ali?
Just to thank everyone for all your support. I usually like to have a list of names to thank some people by name, but I don't have those in front of me today. We'll do that next week. But we appreciate each and every person. And also just to say Eid Mubarak, happy Eid to a happy and meaningful Eid to everyone who will be celebrating.
Yes. And I want to give thanks, as always, to Tamara Nassar, our director and producer of this program and all of the live stream and podcast episodes. Thank you, Tamara. Ellie Gerzon for social media, Michael F. Brown for fact-checking, Pierre Loisel for we had our inaugural episode on KPFA in the San Francisco Bay Area this past week, and we're going to be on every Tuesday at 11 in the morning at KPFA. It's really nice to be back on their airwaves as well. And we are also streaming all over the world and in Canada. I think there's 5 different radio stations that pick up this broadcast, either the news or our condensed version of this episode. So thank you to everyone who's picking that up. Thank you to everyone at the Electronic Intifada, all of our staff, and thank all of you on behalf of myself, John, Ali, Asa, and Tamara. Thank you, and we will see you next week.
I've ever met. One of them was Dr. Maysar Reyes. He was a medical doctor. He was one of the kindest people, one of the smartest people. And he returned to Gaza. He chose to return to Gaza in order to work as a doctor in Gaza. And then Israel bombed him and killed all of his family members. Maysar Reyes was one of my friends. And I still, until this moment, it's been 6 months, and I still can't get over losing Maysara and losing my family and losing many, many other friends in this war. Have you met with Maysara?
Yes, I met Maysara several times when I was in Gaza. I saw him in the UK as well when he visited, he was here studying at King's College, but he also visited Oxford. Professor Nick Maynard, who's my dear friend and mentor, talks a lot about him, and he sees him as, the Palestinian son that he never had. And as you said, he was an incredible human being. He was a beautiful soul. Everyone who talks about him, and even just interacting with him, I just remember it's just pure kindness in the way. And he was an excellent doctor, and he would have made an incredible doctor for years to come. And that is a tragedy, that this life was taken away, this opportunity was taken away. And, he's left behind a wife and child. And this, as you said, I think all of us, this is continuous, and there's many other names. Dr. Omar Farwana, someone who I knew very well, someone who is an incredible mentor, an incredible senior figure within the medical field in Gaza, larger than life. He used to always have us around his house. Every time we were there, we would have food on the table. He would invite his whole family. I would play football on the beach with his grandchildren. These individuals and how they contributed to Gazan society, and now that's all been taken away, that's all been destroyed. And we have to remember them, we have to honor them, and that is one of the big reasons why we started the vigils for Health Workers for Palestine. We did that because I knew these people individually. For me, I felt, if I'm not going to speak up, I have the privilege of having gone there, lived with them, eaten with them, spoken to them, communicated with them. If I'm not going to speak up and remember them, honor them in their death, then who is? So it was a duty. It was never it was an obligation.
This is really interesting because you are a medical doctor, but you also identify yourself as an activist. Why would a medical doctor who lives and works in the UK, who could have a good life, luxurious life, go and spend his time doing activism. Why do you feel this is important for you?
So I'd never been an activist previous to this. That's the honest truth. I had been lucky enough to go to Gaza and the West Bank as part of these medical delegations to teach trained medical students. Even in my student days at Oxford, Operation Cast Lead happened. I was involved in small scale activism at that stage, but nothing to this level. And then we were talking about this earlier, the turning point for me, the thing that just something snapped, was when I heard the news of Al Ahli Hospital being bombed. I was driving back from Oxford. I'd gone to see a very good friend of mine, say Ian Chalmers, someone who's again a mentor and someone who worked in Gaza in the 60s, and he had always told me about his experiences there. And I was driving back and he called me and he said, "This is the news. I've just heard directly from Dr. Khamis Al-Laysiev, again a very prominent figure in the Gaza medical system. 800 people have been killed by an airstrike on Al Ahli Hospital." And I didn't go to bed that night. I mean, I tried to sleep, but the whole night I was in turmoil thinking, how can they target a hospital? Like, they've hit residential buildings, they've hit bakeries, they've hit sanitation plants, but now they're targeting hospitals. Have they lost their mind? And I woke up the next day and I had a very frank discussion with my wife. And I said, this is my duty now. I have to talk about this. I have to. And there were already people within the team, Professor Nick Maynard, Tanya Haj Hassan, and others who had started doing some media at that stage and talking. And at that point, I felt compelled. This is not something I can say. This is an innate feeling that I have to do something about this. And this is the only way I can do it. So that's where that started. Now, the kind of activism with vigils and protests and demos, that came about, a few weeks later. That came about in November. And that was in response to censorship. That was us trying to organize a fundraising event for Gaza in London, in one of the most prestigious venues, the Royal College of Physicians. Everything was sorted. We had people coming from outside, Professor Izzeddin Abu Leish, Dr. Musab Nasser for Fraser Scientific, so, international travels, and they arrived. And then we got a message from the Royal College saying, for security reasons, we cannot hold your event. 48 hours before the event with, sold out, 400 people.
Security reasons.
Security reasons.
Does that make sense to you?
It makes no sense. And we spoke to them. We said, okay, if you're concerned about security, we can provide you with security. We have, and they said, well, that's not going to be good enough. There was no proper process. It's just a word that's thrown at you. And I wrote directly to the college president, and I said to her, please rethink this, because this A, looks terrible on your part, but B, this is censorship. This is unacceptable. Obviously, I had a typical, very sort of mild response for security, and they talked about security, but they also talked about the logistics and also not covering both sides. And
Both sides.
This was a medical fundraiser for Gaza, for a charity, an NGO, to provide medical aid.
What do you think the real reason behind banning this event?
Well, we know that for them, the idea of us talking about Gaza, about humanizing Palestinians.
What is so harmful about humanizing the Palestinians and talking about healthcare in Gaza?
Because it humanizes them, and it goes against the narrative, which is a dehumanization narrative. It goes against,
But these are doctors. These are health workers. All of their work should be about humanizing people, regardless of their color of their skin or ethnicity. This is what you do. This is the oath that you doctors do. Like, I was meeting with, I have many friends who are Palestinian doctors. And one day we had this discussion. If one day you were in a position where you found an injured Israeli soldier, will you treat him or not? And all of them said, yes, we will treat them because they are doctors.
So I will challenge that with some stories that I've heard, which, it horrifies me. And you're right. As doctors, we take a Hippocratic oath. You'd think that we're all, we should treat life equally. But I have been directly heard stories of doctors within the NHS who have openly said. So I'll give you an example. The Royal College of Pediatrics put out a statement, which is a Royal College that I'm part of as a pediatrician, put out a statement saying the killing of children is unacceptable and children should never be a target. As a result of that, they had death threats to the president. They had attacks from the Zionist lobby. They had Jewish doctors coming in and basically saying you're not presenting both sides of the argument. And not only that, but they actually, and this is a prominent Jewish group.
I don't know how to react to that.
This is a prominent Jewish group within the bloc, said to them directly, their biggest issue was the fact that in that statement they mentioned the 7th of October attacks and what's happening after. And they said these should never be associated. These are separate. And the response was, what do you mean by this is separate? And they said, well, the 7th of October is a special case and it's not an equal. You can't essentially treat Israeli lives equal to Palestinian lives. That was the kind of end. I don't think it was said in so many words, but that was the end message that was being said. So this is a doctor, a children's doctor, who looks after children in the UK.
This is a criminal.
In the NHS, would come out and openly say, I don't think Palestinian lives are equal to Israeli lives.
No, this reminds me of Animal Farm, by George Orwell. When they say all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. This actually applies to reality. In this era of time, they say that all humans are equal, but in fact, they mean some humans are more equal than others. Some humans are more worthy than others.
And there's plenty of examples. So let's say, as a pediatrician, I always talk about children. So for me, one of the first things I noticed in this current genocide was there were no children coming from Gaza to the UK or anywhere in Europe or the US being treated. And I think back to Ukraine. In my hospital, Great Ormond Street Hospital, we took 150 children from Ukraine within a few weeks of the conflict. Just took them on board, treated them, children who needed chemotherapy, whatever it was. And the government covered all these costs, as part of the response plan, the emergency response plans. And that's great. That's how government should react to a crisis. I have no issue with that. In fact, that is beautiful. That is what should be happening. In comparison, and we tried this, so we very early on went to our hospital and other hospitals in London and said, what's the process to make this happen? Do you see what's happening? And I showed them pictures of children with horrific injuries, burns injuries that would require multiple plastic surgical operations to be done. And to be fair, the response from the hospital directors and the chief executives was very positive. They wanted this to happen. But you know what the roadblock was? The roadblock was the government. The roadblock was David Cameron. The roadblock was the Home Office. And despite initially them saying, sure, we can try and instigate this and we can try and help, very quickly they went silent. And very quickly it was clear that there was pressure on them to prevent this from happening. And to this day, not a single child from Gaza has come to the UK for treatment. Not a single child. France has taken children. Italy has taken children. The US has taken children. I was sitting at dinner a few weeks back with a pediatric neurologist, a friend of mine from Boston, who's hosting a Palestinian Gazan family in his house. His wife is Palestinian, and he's hosting them in his house, a child that came with complex craniofacial abnormality that needs an operation and multiple operations. And in the UK, nothing like this has happened. It's been actively blocked, in fact.
On the 7th of October, after Hamas attacks on Israel, the Ministry of Health raised the Israeli flag here in the UK. They did that. And what did they do when a Shifa hospital was bombed, when Al Ahli hospital was bombed, when Nasser hospital was bombed, when all of the over 30 hospitals were bombed in Gaza? What did the Ministry of Health do? How did they react to that?
Well, they questioned it, first of all, because within 24 hours, the first response was, oh, maybe it was a Hamas rocket that fell out of the sky like a cartoon and came back down. So, the first, and we've seen this time and time again, every time there's been one of these horrific atrocities, there's been an attempt from the Israelis to change that narrative, and the UK has just willingly gone along with that. No flag was raised. In fact, if anything, the Palestinian flag has become almost like a dirty thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that we have to use a watermelon as a symbol. and this is, you know, it's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day. This is not just a flag or a symbol. Every part of our, if you know, and I say our because as Arabs, as people, you know we were all one and the same until, you know, we got divided by the UK and the Empire. But you know, for example, the word intifada. The word intifada now is used as if it's like a terrorist sort of association. Like, you know, they now use it. I see it in Piers Morgan. He's shouting, you know, how can you say the word intifada?
It means uprising.
It means uprising,
yeah.
exactly, uprising. This is part of our history, our heritage. And they're trying to now turn all this history into just negativity and try to wipe it away. So, you know, you're right. I mean, there was no sign of solidarity with Palestinians when these atrocities happened. And the only thing that actually I feel in the last 6 months, at one point, for a very short period of time, when there was an actual uproar and proper uproar from Western governments, was when their own were killed, the World Central Kitchen. 7 foreign nationals, which is a tragedy and a travesty in itself. But it took 7 white people, essentially, to be killed for some sort of uproar to start appearing from within our own government and within our own power structures. And again, what happened since then? Has there been a full investigation into that? Have we heard about this since then? No, because, you know, then you had to worry about the Iran-Israel crisis.
And the mass graves that we discovered, the Shifa Hospital and Nasser Hospital, they don't talk about it as if it's something normal. Killing the Palestinian children and women and men has become normalized here in the West, as if it's okay. It's like that it's okay that the Palestinians die. It's okay that the Palestinians are killed. It's okay that our hospitals are bombed. It is okay. How have we reached this point?
Just on one point, I just want to mention, because you said the women, the children, the men, and I feel very strongly about this because they are all innocent people, but the men have also been subjected to, you know, levels of barbarity. We were talking about the torture and abduction and the sexual violence. I mean, how have we forgotten now that, you know, early on, within the first few months of the genocide, you were seeing men stripped naked, medics from hospitals being stripped naked,
Yes.
and lined up and blindfolded and standing in football stadiums or in the streets, essentially lined up as if they were about to be executed. And we know that some of you know, many of them were either executed, again, possibly buried alive. How have we come to this? We've come to this because we have allowed this dehumanization narrative to continue, and we've allowed Israel to continue with the impunity. Every time one of these crimes has been committed, every time a health worker has been killed, a hospital has been targeted. And when I say we, I'm talking about obviously the power structures, but I'm also talking about people who are neutral, people who are fence sitting, people who don't want to speak up. They see something like this, but something is holding them back. And I think we know what is holding them back. It's the fear of repercussions. It's the fear of being labeled an anti-Semite. It's the fear of, you know, your job, your security, your life in the UK or in the West, wherever you are. So I think it's twofold. We've allowed this dehumanization to continue, but we've also not been able to speak up because as a collective, there is still a silent majority that are fearful of the consequences, because we hear these stories of, in my profession, doctors being referred to the General Medical Council, losing their jobs, doctors who have been stopped from working or have been censored or have been threatened or been bullied at work for being outspoken.
Many of my friends who are Palestinians, actually, and they work in the NHS as doctors here, and they could be wonderful speakers, but every time I ask someone to speak up, they refuse. Why? They say because they fear that their GMC registration can be revoked. Do you know, in your experience, any of the doctors who you worked with who got punished for the work that they do for Palestine or for speaking up?
So, I mean, I've personally, there's been repercussions against me. So for my work, I've had I've had a formal complaint sent directly to University College London, UCL, where I'm doing my PhD at the moment, to the top, the head of the university, for me organizing that, one of the fundraising events that we held. and for speaking up about the situation. And again, I've had the Jewish Chronicle threaten to write a piece about me, that I incite violence within the medical profession. But actually, on both of those accounts, I've been lucky in that we've managed to fight those back very quickly, and actually those people have just disappeared because there was no basis to what they were saying. But I know colleagues, I know nursing colleagues who were coming to our vigils, who were abused in the corridor in their own hospital, labeled as terrorists, shouted at, spat at. I know of at least 2 doctors, one who was put on suspension from the GMC for a period of time whilst they were investigating. A dear friend of mine, also but in Canada, was put on forced administrative leave for 3 months from her job for doing media work.
And a pale afternoon, and I walked right here, Lord, and
Thank you. Thank you for joining me. Have a great evening.
and a pale afternoon, and I walked right here, Lord, and
Thank you.
Sam Melvin, why you just say no?
Thank you. Have a good afternoon. Have a great evening. Of Just Say No.
Thank you.
What is it?